Cassimius.
Here.
We have 5. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Just for the note, tomorrow night on the Common Council, we'll be appointing 2 new members to the Board of Estimate and Taxation, bringing us back to full staffing. So first item on the agenda, I need a motion to approve the January 9th, 2023 minutes of the regular meeting.
Motion.
Mr. Cassimis, are there any corrections, deletions, omissions?
Yeah, it's Troy. Just one on page 3 on the bold, starting with Mayor Rilling. The second sentence should say this capital appropriation, not tis. So minor.
Okay. Any further corrections, deletions, omissions? Seeing none, all in favor of the minutes as corrected?
Aye.
Right.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Next is the transfer. There's no special appropriation agenda. Now there is the transfer agenda. Mr. Dakowitz or Mr. Ellis?
Yeah, just 2 transfers this evening over $5,000. The first one is from the fire department. They're asking for an additional $20,000 to cover a shortfall in the hydrant rentals for the first taxing district. They're asking, they have a surplus of funds in their full-time salaries due to not being fully staffed. So they're asking for $20,000 to be transferred over to the water account. And I know that this has been a bit of a recurring theme over time, but for the 24 budget request, they have asked for an increase of about 12% in the water account. So hopefully we won't be having a repeat of these types of requests in the coming year.
Okay, and when do we move the transfer agenda as one item? So if you want to talk to us about the recreation and parks.
Yeah, we've got Ken Hughes here on that one. He has a request for $45,000 from, again, full-time wages and salaries to electrical supplies. And Ken is here with us, and I will let him give you the details.
Hi, good evening, Mayor, members of the board. Thank you for having me. So last budget cycle, the Parks Department requested the creation of a new electrician position, which we funded through the consolidation of several of our electrical supply accounts. So that money was moved over as of July 1 last year. Our electrician just started yesterday. I'm sorry, today. Today was his first day. So that left us with 6 months still having to spend for an electrical contractor. We did put $92,000 away for the electrician. So I'm asking for just about half of that to be put back into my electrical supply accounts.
So I'll need a motion to pass these for the transfer agenda.
So moved.
Mr. Abrams, any questions, concerns, comments?
I guess just the only comment would be on the water, on the fire hydrant is, I thought we had a whole number of conversations on that, and I thought we were in pretty good shape as to what our expense was going to be. And now all of a sudden we're looking at $20,000 more. Is that more than what they were billed originally? Or is this just, you didn't have the money in the budget? No, right?
Well, it looks like it was an increase that I can't tell from the invoice whether or not it was planned or not. I don't think we have Chief Gatto on the line this evening. But yeah, they're basically going to be short, that $20,000 in the budget. But as I said, I think we should be covered for the next fiscal year with a pretty significant percentage increase in that same line item.
I don't think there's anything we can do about it. We get the bill, we got to pay it. But the last time we went around on this, we said if there's going to be an increase, we wanted to get some information from what is the first taxing district to let us know that there was going to be an increase and to explain it. So I think the next time this comes around, we've got to stick to our guns. That these guys can't just give us a bill and say pay it without giving us advance notice, because it's not in our budget. If they want to wait till next year, then fine, next year.
Yeah, we've had that
I
discussion
second
and
that.
go ahead.
I second that, Tom. Yeah, we talked about this for 3 months, and the deal was that they would to come to us first, show us a bill ahead of time, and let us know what it's for. And I know there's 2 entities that charge us for the rental of the hydrants, but yeah, this surprised me, and this should not happen again.
Okay. I'll carry that back to Chief Gatto, and at the very least, we should be able to get a schedule and when the increases take place, and then I can double back on the 24 requests and make sure that we're covered.
Yeah, and Tom, that was supposed to have been the agreement, is that there was a clear schedule
Okay.
with visibility of the rate increases. Again, I'll go back to Jim's first point, though. If this is simply the bill reflects the schedule that was agreed to, and we simply need to transfer money from one internal account to another to cover it, I'm good. But if it's another surprise increase, we'll get ahead of it for 2024, but we must.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah, unexpected is written right there, and I don't like that word there. So
Any further comments or discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the transfer agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
I
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Next item on the agenda is the presentation of the FY 23-24 recommended operating budget. Before we get into that presentation, I do have some comments I'd like to make. And first of all, I want to thank the Board of Estimate and Taxation, people who are willing to serve on the Board of Estimate and Taxation and who are very responsible when it comes to the city funds. And I appreciate the time and effort that you put into it. So every year, the budget process is a challenging one because I and we need to be cognizant of several competing priorities while proposing a fiscally responsible budget that does not jeopardize our residents' ability to afford to live in our community. How much we raise taxes on Norwalkers must remain a major consideration in not only this year, but all the budgets that we put together. As you're all well aware, residents have been dealing with unprecedented rates of inflation to the tune of 8.5%, rising costs of goods and services, and quite frankly, many of them have not fully recovered from the pandemic. Many of them are still either in lower paying jobs or out of jobs whatsoever, and they're having trouble, economically, and we have to be very aware of that. So therefore, we must work together to have a fair, equitable, and balanced approach to the budget. We must have a budget that addresses both the critical funding and services that seniors, students, and all residents need, while making sure we don't make Norwalk unaffordable. That's why this year I proposed a budget with an overall increase of 2.46. That's the final number. Is that, Mr. Jackowitz, 2.46? Want to make sure, I'm sure. I may have gone a little higher. You're on mute. You're on mute.
I have 2.46. Tom probably has it to the 6th decimal place, but I think we're good there.
Okay, so among others, my budget includes funding for improving and maintaining Norwalk's world-class assets such as our parks, green spaces, and incredible beaches by supporting improved field maintenance and usage, combating flooding and pursuing sustainability efforts to combat the threats of climate change, supporting local businesses and entrepreneurs, improving traffic and congestion by building upon our transportation infrastructure and increasing mobility by installing more sidewalks, bike lanes, and trail systems, providing critical services for those in need, especially the most economically disadvantaged community members, investing in mental health services for children and families, and perhaps most importantly, supporting our schools so they can continue to provide a world-class education for students. At the beginning of the budget process, I asked all my department heads to be conservative with their requests and to keep their budget requests below 3.5 and more if they could. Now, as most of them did, a few were not able to, but as a result, the city budget side is virtually flat with a 0.75% increase, less than 1%. The Board of Education, on the other hand, came forward with a request for 12.69% increase. As you know, I have a track record of increasing the Board of Education's budget year after year at much higher rates than any of my predecessors, demonstrating the city's ongoing commitment to making sure every student in Norwalk has access to a world-class education by making smart investments in our schools and educators. I'm proud of Norwalk's progress that we're making in the past decade on behalf of our students. They are the future and most important resource we can invest in. My budget includes a 4% increase for the Board of Education. That's nearly $9 million increase. It would build upon the progress we've made for every student in Norwalk. While this increase is significantly higher than what I proposed for the city budget, it is less than the Board of Education's full request. This is because it is absolutely critical that we keep all needs of the community and at the top of our mind. When it comes down to it, we simply could not fund everything and expect many of our residents to take a hit. We must balance everyone's needs. If you read Councilwoman Jen McMurray's op-ed a couple of weeks ago, she addressed the fact of wants versus needs. There are needs that must be addressed, but there's also wants that should be addressed if possible. Perhaps this is not the year that we can afford to do all the wants that people want. The Board of The Board of Education's request for a 12.69 increase would be equivalent to a $27 million increase to last year's budget. Simply not equitable for the community, nor does it balance the needs of other ongoing priorities in the city. If we move forward with that request, it would mean the taxpayers would see an average 8 to 12% tax increase citywide. A tax increase of this nature would be nothing short of irresponsible. I'd like to remind you that I prioritized our schools since I came into office, and the schools have made historic progress in increasing the quality of education. In addition to supporting historically high operating funds for our schools, last year we announced several plans to upgrade our neighborhood schools. In 2022 alone, we put forth our plans to build a new Norwalk High School, completed the groundbreaking of Cranberry Elementary School, which is well underway of being constructed, welcomed students into newly renovated state-of-the-art Jefferson School, and made the historic announcement that after more than 40 years, students in the South Norwalk community will finally have a neighborhood school. One neighborhood at a time, the city of Norwalk is working to deliver the best learning environments for students throughout Norwalk, and they will only continue. I know that some feel that this budget does not go far enough to fund our schools. I am committing today that the city will continue to seek creative ways to fund a number of critical services, including additional mental health, and will look to build the relationships with community providers and nonprofit organizations to meet these critical needs. We know that there's a critical need for mental health services, not only in Norwalk, but other places as well. We will be working with city providers, other providers that will take that responsibility and help us provide much needed mental health services for students and anybody else in the city that might be in need. This is a fiscally responsible budget. It represents a fair, equitable, and balanced approach. It balances many of the city's major priorities while continuing to support historically high funding for our schools without jeopardizing our residents' ability to afford to continue to live in our community. And again, as I close, I just want to say thank you to the Board of Estimate and Taxation members for all the hard work that you put in, not only during budget season, but throughout the year. Thank you. Mr. Dakowitz.
Thank you. May I share my screen now? Do I have that access? Can everyone see this?
Yeah, it's there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. So, let me start by just talking about this presentation. We're going to start with the process, the budgeting process the city goes through with our calendar. Then we will present the recommended operating budget. We'll talk a little bit about the COVID and ARPA funds that the city was fortunate to receive. the recommended operating budget by city department. We'll talk a little bit about our unrestricted unassigned fund balance, sometimes known as the rainy day fund. We'll talk about how the budget translates into the actual tax levy and mill rate, and then a conclusion. So when we look at the calendar, we start the process in late October. Tom Ellis and his team send pro forma budgets to each department. That includes salaries for all the people on the roster or vacancies, because we know what step increases they're due and what raises they're due. So that takes away a lot of the mystery and a big portion of our budget. We then review the requested budget with all the departments. Between October 28th and December, the departments submit electronically their requests for their departments, and then we meet with them individually over this 4 or 5 week period. Tonight, actually starting last Thursday with the Finance Committee, and continuing on to tomorrow where we do the complete council, is when we present the mayor's recommended budget. On the 23rd, the Finance Committee holds a public hearing and gives their information to the council, who sets a budget cap on March 7th. Your good selves have meetings with all the departments between March 8th and March 21, a brisk 2 week period. Then you hold a public hearing on the 22nd, and you forward the tentative budget to the council. The Common Council sets the final budget cap, and if the BET does not go over the cap that was initially set by the council, then it's really pro forma. And then you would set the final budget and tax levy May 1st. Here are the numbers for the budget. We tried to give some historical context as well. So on the city side, the local expenditures have risen from 157.5 up to 196.3 in our current budget, but pretty flat to 197.8. However, I must point out that we have something called in-kind services, which we provide for the Board of Ed. These are allocations of various departments where we give them services. It could be payroll, legal services, IT services. Those services have ranged from 12 million to 9.5. Forecast for this coming year is 10 million. We also have debt service on the public school projects, on the bonded debt. And that has increased from 13 million as we got into the heavy construction schedules and borrowings, up to a forecast of 19.4 million this coming year. So those adjustments are an additional almost $30 million. So we deduct them from the city side. The city's portion of local expenditures that they're spending on city activities is 168.4 million. And this year, we're going down by 1.6 from last year, a little bit less than 1%. The Board of Ed, the numbers are 185 up to 198, 204, 208, 217 was last year. 226.6 is the 4% increase the mayor is recommending. But one must add back those in-kind services to show the true share of local taxes that is for the benefit of the public schools. So those totals go from 211, 234, 244 up to 256. Last year it was increased by 9.7, 4.1%. This year, 11.9, 4.9%. Grand total doesn't change, 376, 385 up to 424.4. Here's your 2.46 rounded to 2.5%. And the bottom line just shows that the true allocation of local tax dollars over quite a number of years is approximately 60% for the Board of Ed and 40% for the city. Wanted to show this slide again. It hasn't changed from last year, but just to remind everyone, the good fortune we have of getting reimbursements from the federal government sometimes through the state. FEMA gave us 1.7 million due to COVID. The COVID relief fund was state funds, which came from the federal government and then were distributed by the state. We got 1.9 million and the schools got 7.2 million. They also got COVID Office of Early Childhood, another 450,000. And then we have the ESSER grants. The ESSER grants are state funds supporting education, 11 million, 2.1 million. And then ESSER 3 is where they got their ARPA funds, which was 24.8 million. If you add all the ESSER grants, they got almost $38 million. Secretary of State, $127,000 to the Registrar of Voters. That was to protect our elections. And then the city got ARPA funds, and we got a total of 39 million. 22 million was as a city, and then because Connecticut does not have functioning county governments, it was allocated per capita, and our allocation was 17.2 million. So we got 39.3 million. In total, the city and the Board of Ed got a total of 88.5 million, 64.1 million of which was ARPA funds. So we're grateful. It was one time. We were coming through COVID and other decisions the federal government made to help support local government. And we've been judicious in trying to spend these monies wisely and in accordance with getting the best investments for the city. The mayor's recommended budget, we're recommending an increase of 8.7 million or 4% over last year's approved 217.8 for a total of 226.6 million. On the city side, we're increasing only 1.5 million, 0.75% over our 196.3, which gets us to 197.8 million. Looking at the numbers on the city side, line by line, interesting information comes out. Employee benefits, last year, the highest budget line item, 38.5 million, drops to 26.4, drop of 12.1 million. I've set up a separate slide after this, so we'll talk about it after we go through this slide. This 31% decrease, 12.1 million decrease, is a big reason why our increase for the year is only 0.75%. Debt service, 35.3, going up significantly to 40.4, an increase of 5.1 million, 14%. We are increasing the amount of total debt outstanding. And at the same time, the interest rates at which we borrow have been increasing. I don't have to tell you. So last year, even though we only had a $39 million capital budget, we ended up borrowing $82 million of principal amount of bonds. It actually had proceeds of 90 million because we sold them as a premium. And the point is that as we increase the amount of debt and increase the interest rates, the debt service line will keep increasing. Last year it was number 2. This year it's number 1 expense. Police and combined dispatch, 28.5 million. Mickey Docimo is on the call. He comes in exactly at 3.5%. It's like the lunar landing on the moon. You give him a target, he hits it. Public Works, 26.3 million. The recommended budget is 28.8, an increase of 2.4 million, 9.3%. Most of those changes are due to recycling. We have an increase of $1 million on the charges for recycling and trash. It used to be that with recyclable materials, we got reimbursed as the company would sell that on the market. The market has changed, supply and demand. We now have to pay to have those materials hauled away. Additionally, solid waste was an increase of $800,000. So if I look at the 2.4 million increase, 1.8 alone was just on garbage and trash. Fire department, 21.7 up, 22.4 It's only up 3.4%. Pension plans, we'll talk a little bit about that as well. 15.7 to 18, 2.4 million, an increase of 15%. Everything else is either a small dollar amount, even if the percentages are high, it's off a very small base. And that's how the city alone got to an increase in total of 1.5 million or 0.7%, 0.75. Board of Ed was 4%, and you know that 2.46, 2.5%. Let me now talk about some of the key drivers. Employee benefits and insurance, 26.4 million. That was a reduction of 12.1, 31.5%. A couple of factors. 2 years ago, we changed our health insurance carrier from United Healthcare to Anthem. And the controller's department had to set up codes to handle the copays from employees that contribute to that health insurance premium. Unfortunately, it mistakenly got credited to the health insurance account for the Board of Ed rather than for the city. It happened in the middle of a fiscal year. We discovered it in November as we were preparing this budget. So it was about a 2-year effect, and it was about $5.2 million. The insurance fund was intact. It's just the health insurance sub-account for the Board of Ed was overstated, and the health insurance account for the city was understated by that 5.2 million. On June 30th of 2022, the fund balance for the health insurance account for the Board of Ed was 5.9 million. It included the entire 5.2 error. So I work closely with Linda Osmani, the CFO of the Board of Ed, and we moved the 5.2 million from the Board of Ed's health insurance account to the city's health insurance account. I had already prepared a projection for health insurance expenses based on what our consultant had advised and based on what I thought was our balance. I want to keep a reasonable balance. So this 5.2 translated into a reduction of what we needed to put in the budget for health insurance. It's one time, it will not happen again. I've had accounting experts review our calculations to make sure we didn't miss anything else, and to also give us advice on improving control procedures so that it doesn't happen again. OPEB, these are other pension benefits, post-employment benefits, most notably health insurance for our retirees. We've been pretty fortunate. Last time I looked, in Connecticut, only 50% of the cities and towns have a OPEB trust, let alone where they are funded. We are at over 95% funding, and we have been funding it aggressively over the last several years. Because we funded it aggressively, and during those years, we had excellent investment returns. And at the same time, we have had lower usage of health expenditures, hospitals, doctors, etc. The OPEB costs have come down, and our actuaries said our required annual contribution may be reduced 8 million from last year. This too, it's not forever. They said, we've seen this with other cities where there's been a reduction in usage and utilization of healthcare during COVID. But as we come back from COVID, there tends to be a resurgence. So it might be that the older retirees didn't go to their doctors and didn't have healthcare expenses like they normally would, but in the next year or two, they might. So this OPEB contribution may go up next year and the year after, but for this year, we have an $8 million reduction. The workers' comp sub-account in our insurance fund looked like it did not have sufficient fund balance. We have a very large IBNR component. That stands for incurred but not yet reported. So the way the actuaries on that plan look at it, they look at our trends, they look at workers' comp injuries. And they have told us that an injury might be estimated as a $300,000 cost, but a year later, the employee's health deteriorates, and that can turn into a $1.5 million cost, an estimate over the lifetime. So workers' comp has a very large IBNR component. I was not satisfied with the amount of our fund balance, so I took 1 million from the health insurance and reinforced our workers' comp balance. Debt service, we talked about, up by 5.1 million, and pensions went up in contradistinction to the OPEB. The pensions went up because of increased usage and utilization of healthcare costs. The police pension plan had an increase of 500,000 because of this extra utilization. The fire pension fund had an increase of 400,000. The city fund, which is a pension fund that's closed to new members, new employees go on a defined contribution plan, not this defined benefit plan. So their increase was only 100,000, but because of that increased utilization, that was $1 million that got bumped up at the end after the actuaries looked at their preliminary numbers. So these were some of the key drivers, mostly positive, some negative. Let's look at our rainy day fund balance. When you look at the unrestricted unassigned fund balance, it's important to compare it in a ratio to our expenditures. $70 million sounds like a lot, but not if your budget is $3 billion. So we compare the fund balance to the expenditures and look at that ratio. So our expenditures have been going up in total, 348 to 385. Our current year budget is 414. Our mayor recommended budget is 424 million. Our rainy day fund went from 69.7, 58.4, 72.4. At the end of 22, June 30, we were at 74.9. We are planning in this current year budget to use 4 million of that rainy day fund. The auditors have explained to us, if you plan to use the rainy day fund and you make that decision official before June 30th, they require us to reduce our unrestricted unassigned fund balance by that amount. We don't lose it, it just goes into assigned fund balance. So 74.9 minus the 4 we budgeted this year gets you to 70.9. This coming 2024 mayor recommended budget, we planned on a $6 million reduction of the rainy day fund. 70.9 minus 6 gets us to 64.9. When we calculate the ratios of the unrestricted unassigned fund balance to the expenses, 20%, 16.1, 19, 19.4, 17.1, 15.3. We budget for a balance of revenue and expenditures so that fund balance will not change. We also have a policy where we try to keep the fund balance between 7.5% and 15%. And given the fact we are in very uncertain economic times, and we want to try to insulate our taxpayers from larger tax increases, utilizing some of this fund balance, $6 million, to offset the tax increases is a valid reason to use this fund balance, given that we're over 15%. So we're planning a $6 million drawdown. Our auditors will deduct it. This is a very important factor in the bond ratings. Bond rating analysts are charged with doing one thing, analyzing our finances to determine the possibility that we may not make principal repayments or interest payments in full or in a timely manner. And when they see a very healthy 64.9 or $70.9 million rainy day fund, it gives them great comfort because they say, it doesn't matter what will happen in any one year. If they had a problem paying the principal and interest, they could always tap into the rainy day fund. So it gives them great comfort despite everything else going on in the city. Bottom line, how does the tax levy translate into mill rates by district? Well, we have the total budget 414, which went up to 424 recommended tonight, and you know these numbers. We then get a core mill rate, which this is the total mill rate. Different districts have different services. Okay, the fire service is only given to the 1st through 5th districts. Okay, garbage pickup is for the first 4 districts, and lighting, street lighting, is only for the 4th and 5th. So what we do is we carve out those expenses and then we allocate them only to the districts that are receiving those services. That's the major reason for the difference in the mill rates. So we have last year's mill rate or the current year mill rate, the recommended mill rate for this coming year, and the increase ranges from 0.734 up to 1.5112, a range of 2.99% up to 6.59%. We use the median home value for each of the districts based on the 2019 grand list. October 1st of 2023, we'll have a new grand list and a new revaluation. But because we didn't change this from last year, the percentage increase in the mill rate will be the same percentage increase in the tax bill. We take that mill rate, 25.42, multiply it by the median home value, and we get a recommended budget tax bill, 6105 in the 1st district. Compared to last year, it's up 211, 3.58, and so on for each of the districts. So the lowest increase was the 5th district. Well, on a dollar basis, the lowest increase was the 2nd district, $199. The largest was the 6th district. On a percentage basis, the 5th district was lowest at 2.99%, and 6th district 6.59. The 10th district, which is our motor vehicle mill rate, has remained constant at 30.467 mils, same as last year, and below the maximum cap the state allows us. So in conclusion, I echo what the mayor said earlier. This is a balanced, fair budget with fiscal restraint and affordable for Norwalk single-family owners. Thank you. Glad to
Thank you.
answer-
Thank you, Mr. Dakowitz. Do we have any questions of Mr. Dakowitz? Mr. Abrams?
Henry, thank you very much. A very thorough presentation as always and very clear. Really appreciate that. 2 questions for you. The first on slide 8, when you talk about some of the savings associated with pension benefit, et cetera. And I know we're focused on the FY24 budget, but what that basically says is we need to be prepared as we go into FY25 for a very likely $12 million increase on the city side as a starting point. Is that a correct way to read slide 8?
Are you talking about the employee benefits?
The employee benefits, correct. So on slide 8, you say that's a one-time savings.
Well, some of it is one time. Okay, the health insurance 5.2 million is one time. That's correction of an error. We're never going to see it again. We don't expect to make any more errors. OPEB, it went down because we've been doing the right things with OPEB fund,
Okay.
funding it well. We saved 8 million. Now, one would expect maybe we're at a level now that this is just the new normal because we're so well funded. The warning I got was if the retirees utilize health care services as they might have done pre-COVID, not all the way up, but let's say that the last year was particularly low, we might see an increase there. I'm estimating now, which is 18 months in advance, of maybe 2 to 3 million. So it's not
Okay.
12 million bouncing back.
Okay, so thank you. So the one time really is the 5.2.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. I misunderstood it as the total 12.1. Thank you.
That clarified.
All right. And then slide 9 for a moment, please.
Sure.
Again, I think this makes total sense. This is very, very clear. I'm just curious, your outlook on, we planned for $4 million of rainy day fund usage this year. What do we think will look like from an actuals perspective?
I look at all these historicals, and for example, in 20, we planned for a $6 million drawdown, and we ended up having a $6 million increase. So we've had a history where the departments have been excellent managers, and we haven't needed to use these drawdowns. Additionally, over the last 2 years, 2022 was zero. We had planned to use ARPA funds, and we planned to use originally $13 million in 22, and then there was a reduction because of pilot payments. So we planned for about 7. We didn't need it. And the same thing with this year. We have a plan for some ARPA and some rainy day fund of 4 million. Now, ARPA comes with a time deadline. We have to allocate it or designate it. I believe it's by the end of 23 and spend it by the end of 25. Okay. So because of that time deadline, when we need to use those funds to balance the budget, we use the ARPA funds first. That combined with the good management we've had recently, I don't know, maybe we won't need this 4 million again at the end of the year. It's very hard to judge early in the process, especially with the supply chain issues, where sadly, for example, on the capital side, we wanted to buy a new fire apparatus. We budgeted a certain amount, and the lowest bid came in at 400,000 more.
Right.
And I'm worried about that. It's nice to hear that inflation has gone down from 8% to 7%, but it's still 7%. And it depends whether it's eggs or oil or which is coming down. We monitor it carefully, our purchasing department and each department that's spending the money. But we might have to use the 4 million this year. Who knows?
Thank you
Just
very much
two
for the
quick-
clarifications.
Two quick things, if I could. In the city's ARPA funds, recognizing the fact that those funds were going to eventually not be there, we did not spend our ARPA funds on things that would be recurring costs. So not something that would carry from year to year to year, such as hiring extra personnel. We did put a lot of the ARPA funds into our economy, our business community, other kinds of projects that the city was planning on doing. But again, it's not a recurring cost that will come year after year after year. That would be the case if we hired staff people with it. Secondly, Henry, just a quick correction, the ARPA funds need to be encumbered by the end of 24 and spent by 26.
Sorry, thank you. And I would just clarify with the mayor's comments. There were certain people that were hired for certain specific projects, but we put them on payroll as grant employees, which we do all the time, which says you're hired and it's funded by a grant. When the grant is used up, your job goes away. So we have used ARPA to give resources where we need it, but we did not make any long-term commitments of individuals being hired.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Quick
Yes,
question.
Mr. Kasimis. Oh, Mr. Kasimis first, and then Mr. Jelleret.
That's fine.
Thank you. Thank you. Henry, when I was on the Board of Ed, every year going through the budget process, we would renegotiate health insurance and find significant savings there without losing coverage for the teachers and employees, of course. Do you know if they've done that or are they looking at that?
The mayor charged me a year or two ago to look into alternatives. And the teachers had asked the administration at the public schools to look into that. So I know they're exploring it. When I
Okay.
discussed it with our health insurance consultant, she said, knowing your requirements from your union contracts, you know, we are in an indemnity plan now where we get charged a premium and that's our cost. But she said, if you shop around, there's no free lunch. It's not like somebody else has a magical wand and the cost of our insurance benefits will be lower. Okay, so she said it's very doubtful, given the requirements you have for your union contract agreements, to find something cheaper. But I do know that Linda Osmani, the CFO of the public schools, is looking at alternatives. And there are some problems with implementing them because the provider said, if we give you a policy, we have to do it for all of your personnel, which covers different unions and different requirements. So we don't know how that's going to play out. But I am piggybacking. Linda's been kind enough to let me understand what his process has been. And if we see any glimmer there that we might be able to save money, we're going to try to do that on our side as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Jelleret?
Yeah, let me start off by saying thank you, Henry, and your team, and Tom. And once again, you did a very nice job with this budget as far as presenting it. Very concise, very understandable. I also appreciate the fact that this is the first cut of the operating budget. Actually, I'm relieved to see it when I read this morning what it was. I was a little alarmed when you read the paper over the last couple of months of what it could be for the citizens of this city. So I thank you for this. And I also appreciate, Henry, using the rating agencies as your guardrail as the way to continue to keep NOAA with its AAA rating. I assume that between this and the capital budget that you have presented, I realize you can't tell, but I mean, I know you talk to people. It sounds like we should stay within our AAA rating, which I've always said since I've been on this board that I wanted to maintain. And by maintaining that means keeping interest rates low, which makes it more funds available for the people to spend products. So, you know, losing our AAA rating is not something light that we should take lightly. And I appreciate the fact that you're using it as a guardrail going forward. And once again, I look forward to our next month of meetings. And this is a very good first cut for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me give credit where credit is due. First of all, when you appreciate the way the operating budget numbers came out, it's the mayor's recommendation. And he's the one who has to balance all the different forces. What's doable for the taxpayers, and trying to fund all the different needs and as many of the wants as we can afford. On the capital budget, let me reiterate, the mayor has been adamant about maintaining our AAA bond rating. Based on the analyses our financial advisor, Munistats Bill Lindsay, did a year ago, and I attached his report to the capital budget transmission letter. 400 million is a number that, after analyzing all the cities in Connecticut that are AAA versus AA, 400 million is a number that we worry about, because for our size, for our grand list, for our revenues, 400 million in debt starts getting us into dangerous territory. And just to give you a sense, if you look at our consolidated annual financial report, which came out December 31st, it includes our financial statements as of June 30, 2022. At that time, our outstanding general obligation debt was 305 million. We had 25.9 million of bonds that are maturing in this fiscal year 2023. So as we pay those down, the outstanding debt goes down. But we did issue that 82 million in last August, and it was a very good rate, but it was 82 million because we have so many bonds approved, so many projects approved but not yet funded. So we're sitting today at 361.6 million outstanding. So we'll have some bonds that mature in fiscal year 24, which gives us a free pass. But I'm working with the mayor closely so that we borrow this summer in a manner that retains our AAA, yet funds the most important projects that we have. Some are going to be those previously approved but not yet funded, and some will be this year's capital projects that got approved. So it's going to take some close coordination, but we're working very hard to maintain that AAA rating.
I appreciate your focus there.
Thank you, Henry. Any further questions or comments?
Yes.
Mr. Fraser.
Henry, I had a couple of questions. First of all, obviously, you do a fine job on presenting this information. It's clear, concise, to the point, gives a good picture of where we're going. My first question was on the ARPA. How much more or how much do we have left to use of the ARPA funds? Do you know?
I do know, but I'm going to round because I don't have that piece of paper in front of me.
Sure.
Because we didn't need that $7 million from last year's budget, it went back into our schedule. Our controller, Chitsime Lamb, keeps very detailed records of ARPA monies and ARPA projects. I wanted to make sure, number one, that we only spent it on approved projects based on the federal treasury. And then secondly, that we don't double count and double spend something. So the 7 million went back into the, call it unallocated ARPA funds. And I would say it's about $9.5 million right now. But I know the mayor and others are have been working for months looking at what are the projects, what are the funding needs we have. And again, we want to make sure that we identify them by 2024 and that we spend it by 2026.
So we were probably looking at about $9 million there.
I'd say 9.5.
Okay. The next one was on the mill rates on your last slide there. I happen to be in the 6th taxing district, so this is very near and dear to my heart. That mill rate, that increase is 6.2%. I'm not going to ask you right now to explain it to me, but
I will if you ask.
if I know there was a mistake last year when that was calculated. Is this correct?
This is correct. What happened is the 6th taxing district only gets what we call the core mill rate. It gets city services excluding fire, garbage pickup, and lighting because you're provided that yourself with the 6th taxing district.
Right.
We had a long discussion with Gil Kernan, the controller for the 6th taxing district. And what he did was he said, here's my budget, Henry. How much should the mill rate be for me to get the amount of funds I need in order to make my budget? So we have a grand list that is broken up by district. I take the amount of money he wanted to get, divided through by the grand list, and I get a mill rate factor. Just we collected on behalf of the 6th district. We take that factor and we add it to the core that everyone got. And that's your mill rate for this year of 24.3575. And last year, his 6th taxing district mill rate had not gone up from the previous year. This year it did. So that's part of the reason.
Okay, do you know off the top of your head whether things like paving streets, snow plowing, is that included in the city's allocation to the 6th taxing district?
I believe we take out fire, trash pickup, and lighting. Those are the only things we exclude.
So for example, you do have several sections of the 6th taxing district that pave their own streets, do their own snow removal. So would that, and I'm just picking a couple of quick examples, but wouldn't that also wind up being a credit? That rate?
I hear what you're saying. I have carried forward the methodology that that was done before I got here. And
Okay.
I understand there are private roads all over the city that the Department of Public Works handles. So now you start getting into a question of how many dollars are we talking about and what's a fair allocation and how much time do we have to spend to allocate. The cost of the fire services is by far the largest cost and carve out. If we started carving out every little thing, it would be hard. And I would say, I would just bet it would not be that significant.
Well, I guess my point is that when I look at that increase year over year, that's a fairly significant, not fairly, it's a very significant increase. You know, a lot of people think of the 6th taxing district as being a lot of rich people down there, but there are also a lot of elderly people that moved into the 6th taxing district 30 years ago when the taxes were not nearly this onerous. To have them be hit with another $1,100 in taxes is really very painful to them. So I think we should keep that in mind when we go through, and I will talk to the 6th taxing district controller and go over with him what is in their budget for this year, and then maybe we could have a conversation on this.
Yeah.
I agree with you that if it's small dollars, it's not worth the effort, but you know, watch the nickels and the dimes and the dollars will take care of themselves.
Well, no, that's true. I think what we did is fire, trash pickup, and lighting can be isolated, and we don't provide those services at all.
Right.
We do plow and pave the roads in Rowan. So you're now getting to shorter straws. Take some of.
I don't think you do pave the roads. The number, there are a number of, well, let's not get into it now. It's not the.
No, we do plow and pave the roads in row 8. Absolutely. Now, there are private roads that we don't do that. But there are the roads, and of course, there's 136, which is a state road.
Right.
So we do plow and pave most of the roads, all the city roads when they need it.
Okay, I don't mean to belabor the point, but you know, Bell Island, Pine Point, the Beach Association, they plow their own roads, and as a matter of fact, there was some discussion last year on paving one of the roads, and I think I think it was a Pine Point Association split the difference with the city, or agreed that that one road was not theirs, it was really part of the city. So I don't mean to get into a discussion on it right now. I think we have plenty of time in our meetings going forward. And let's see what the bottom line is on the budget first. I think we'll have a lot more things to talk about there.
Thank you.
Any further comments or discussion? Thank you. And again, thank you, Mr. Dakowitz. We'll move on to the additional information items. So any additional information items of which any members of the BET have a question?
I just want to go over the Lisa's comments. I don't know if Lisa's on, but pretty interesting comments she was making about the credits and things. I don't know if she's prepared. Is she on? I don't know.
I don't see her on.
Lisa B? Lisa Biaggiarelli?
Yes.
No, I don't see her.
Well, I read her comments and it was interesting. Then I guess we'll talk to her next time about the credits, the tax credits that came through due to the larger than expected appeals that were made. So that, and the other thing about the good that she was collecting, they have back taxes that she collected about 200,000. But we'll talk to her next month if she's not here. Thanks.
Any further comments or discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Mr. Abrams adjourns. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We are adjourned. Thank you. It is 7:31.
Good evening, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day tomorrow.
Ah, yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.